We have discussed emission gaps in many other podcasts already, but we will look again here in the context of this United in Science report from WMO. So it's okay to repeat some of the points again. Emissions gaps, UN Environment Program. Key messages here. New national mitigation pledges for 2030 as of 4th November 2021 show some progress towards lowering greenhouse gas emissions, but their aggregate effect on global emissions is insufficient to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The ambition of these new pledges needs to be 4 times higher to get on track to limit warming to 2 degrees C and 7 times higher to get it on track to be 1.5 degrees C. Okay? Good to know that we are not on track, even though there is a valiant effort by the global human to commit to reducing emissions. Global warming over the course of the 21st century is estimated to be limited to 2.8 degrees C with a range of 2.3 to 3.3 degrees C and with a 60% probability. Assuming a continuation of current policies, or 2.5 degrees C with a range of 2.1 to 3 degrees C and 66% probability if new or updated conditional or unconditional pledges are fully implemented. So conditional pledges are those which the countries like India, China and other poor countries may, or developing countries may do only if there is some mechanism, climate finance available to implement those, or technology transfer and other things. Unconditional are those that they will do anyways on their own. If the full implementation of all net zero pledges and announcements to date are included in the assessment, in addition to the updated unconditional and conditional nationally determined contributions, estimated warming over the 21st century is projected to be limited to 2.1 degrees C with a range of 1.9 to 2.3 degrees C and 1.9 degrees C with a range of 1.9 to 2.2 degrees C respectively with a 66% probability. So net zero pledges have been made by of course many countries and also many corporations, but I have podcasts elsewhere showing that monitoring, verifying and reporting of these are not completely reliable yet. Okay, so we have a long way to go. This is just looking at impact of 2030 mitigation pledges on 2030 global emissions relative to previous pledges. Note here that the figure is based on new updated mitigation pledges as of 4th November 2021 and does not include Australia's updated NDC targets. So this is in million tons of CO2 equivalent, so includes non-CO2 greenhouse gases, and this is counting down towards emissions reductions. So we are looking at Argentina, Australia, Brazil and so on to Republic of Korea and the total. Also there are non-G20 and other factors involved here, but the point is that countries have submitted their pledges by 2030, or at least what can be understood by extrapolating these pledges to 2030. So here you can see, for example, Brazil is actually net increase in emissions, and there are this is Canada, so remains positive here by 2030, which is not good news. China, EU is of course down here. So you have to see these as additives here. Now China will bring us here, and then EU will take it down there, and so on. And UK and India, so UK is here, India and Indonesia are not adding much under their NDC and pledges by 2030. This is by 2030. Japan, Mexico, so these are the developing countries with their conditional and unconditional pledges. So who are the big hitters? US promises to be doing a lot. Total non-G20 are here, and other factors, and Republic of Korea is somewhere here because you know all the situation there. So the total is down. This is the total here. of reduction of 4.5 gigatons or 4,500 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. Okay, obviously that shows the acceleration needed to stay on target for the global warming levels of 2 degree, 1.5 degree, and so on. Emissions gaps we have looked at many times already, which is basically looking at historical trends and then adding what the current policy scenarios would mean by 2030, and how they updated policy scenarios. These are 2010 policies, so 20 current policies obviously improved on it in terms of gigaton CO2 equivalent. Is it substantial? Well, depends on the target. Unconditional NDCs and pledges would take us here, so we can compare those to the targets. So 1.5 degree C would be down here, so emissions gaps are obviously the difference between where we are with the current scenarios and NDCs and where we need to be to hit the targets. So here unconditional NDCs and pledge scenarios leave us with 9 gigaton CO2 equivalent, which is the remaining gap to stay within 2 degree C limit, and this is 12.5 gigaton CO2 equivalent. This is conditional NDCs and pledge scenarios. This is unconditional NDCs and pledge scenarios. Median estimate of level consistent with 2 degree C warming, 39 gigaton CO2 equivalent with a range of 33 to 49. So we have a long way to go there. And this is the median estimate of level consistent with 1.5 degree CO2. Okay, so you can see the various warming levels. So turquoise area shows pathways limiting global warming temperature increase to below 2 degrees C with about 66% chance, and green here shows pathways of 1.5 degrees C with 66% chance by 2100. Okay, so obviously we need to also figure out by 2050 where we will be. So estimated global warming over the 21st century by 2050 here. Current policies scenarios will give us 2.8 degrees C with 66% chance. Unconditional NDC and pledge scenario will give us 2.7% again with 66% chance. Unconditional NDC and pledge scenarios with net zero targets added would bring us to 2.2 degrees C with a 66% chance. So we are still a little above the 2 degrees C and definitely much above the 1.5 degrees C target there. And this looks at overview of net zero pathways implied by climate pledges by selected G20 members and the accelerated pathway. So if you want to hit net zero with the target date, then the fastest way is to, of course, go straight down to it, but pledges would take us here and require this pathway to hit zero. So Brazil will in fact go up to 2030, increase emissions, and then start drawing down to net zero. Canada is almost on the same path, almost on the expeditious path, let's say. Growing economies like Brazil, India is not here, but India pledged 2070 as well. So China will emit more before coming back. EU is also almost on the accelerated path. Japan goes up a little bit above the accelerated path but comes down. Republic of Korea goes almost a slow decline and then a faster decline. UK is almost above or faster than the linear path to 2060, but the crisis in Russia invasion of Ukraine and the massive heat waves and droughts they are experiencing have caused various issues. So such crises, socioeconomic, geopolitical, and climate crisis will always play into these. So we have to watch how that goes. US is again on a linear path towards its goals. Concluding with IPCC headline statements, projected global greenhouse gas emissions from NDCs announced prior to the 26th Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change would make make it likely that warming will exceed 1.5 degrees C, and also make it harder after 2030 to limit the warming to below 2 degrees C. This is what the AR6 Working Group 3 said. Global greenhouse gas emissions are projected to peak between 2020 and at the latest before 2025 in global modeled pathways that limit warming to 1.5 degrees C with greater than 50% chance, with no or limited overshoot, and in those that limit warming to 2 degrees C with greater than 67% probability and assume immediate action. So we are still relying on certain pathways here with technological promises that rely on bioenergy, carbon capture, utilization, sequestration, and so on. So future is very uncertain, obviously. In both types of model pathways, rapid and deep greenhouse gas emissions reductions follow throughout 2030, 2040, and 2050, which can be said with high confidence, according to Working Group 3. Without a strengthening of policies beyond those that are implemented by the end of 2020, without a strengthening of policies beyond those that are implemented by the end of 2020, greenhouse gas emissions are projected to rise beyond 2025, leading to a median global warming of 3.2 degrees C with a range of 2.2 to 3.5 degrees C by 2100. This has a medium confidence according to Working Group 3 in AR6. Okay, so again, when we looked at the greenhouse gas emissions in the first podcast of this series, we saw that there is no budging in this, but we need to peak quickly by 2025 if we want to limit to 1.5 degrees C, and to hit 2 degrees C, we need also assumed immediate action on the various things and so on and so forth. So main point is that even though there are many net zero pledges, many NDCs, many updated NDCs, massive investments in electric vehicles, renewables, and efficiencies and so on, we are still not on the pathways because we are still emitting quite a bit more than where we need to be as of 2022. So this is something that has to be kept in mind, and obviously now each year is critical, and NDC's monitoring, reporting and verification will start pretty soon as well. So some of the updated NDCs hit kind of the low-hanging fruit or things that would have happened anyways, but they are being provided or submitted as updated NDCs, which is part of the balance that politically inside the country the government has to do, which is in charge at this time, and their ambitions of economic growth. For a country like China or India, economic growth is a very important goal to bring its people to a standard of living. So obviously they want to be global players in reducing global warming, limiting global warming, mitigation, adaptation, and their role in the NDCs and net zero and so on. But they will also burn more coal if Russian oil supply is hammered by the war and the sanctions. So this kind of back and forth will keep happening. So hopefully progress will be steady despite all these back and forth. Okay.